What if the most powerful prayer you have ever prayed had no beautiful words, no memorized verses, and no steady voice, but was simply you on the floor saying, "Lord, I cannot do this." It is yours? What if that is precisely the prayer God has been waiting to hear from your lips? In this video, you will discover why surrender is not the end of your faith. It is the beginning of your miracle. We are going to talk about the kind of prayer most Christians are afraid to make. The prayer of total honesty, real exhaustion, and unconditional surrender. The prayer that impresses no one, but moves the heart of God. If you are carrying a weight you can no longer bear, fighting battles that are destroying you from the inside, or simply tired of trying to fix on your own what only God can fix, this video was made exactly for you. Stay until the end, because what you are about to learn here could be the turning point your spiritual life needs today. There is a silent lie that has been circulating inside churches for decades. It is not in the sermons, it is not in the doctrines, it is in the faces. It is that rehearsed smile at the church door, that "I am fine, I trust God," said with a steady voice, while everything inside is falling apart. Have you ever said that? Have you ever smiled when you wanted to cry? This video begins right here. Christian culture has created, without meaning to, an environment where weakness is synonymous with lack of faith, where admitting you are not well seems like a confession of spiritual defeat, where asking for help sounds like doubting God, and the result is an entire generation of exhausted believers carrying impossible weights, fighting battles alone, afraid of appearing weak before their brothers and sisters. But the problem is not only cultural, it is personal. It is that voice inside you saying, "You need to sort this out. You cannot show weakness. Pray more, trust more, fight more," and you obey. You fight. You pray with beautiful words and a confident voice. You act as though you have everything under control. Until the day your body gives way, your mind stops, and your heart simply cannot take any more. That day comes for every believer. It does not matter how much you have read the Bible, how much you have served in church, how much you have fasted and prayed. There is a breaking point where human strength simply runs out. And it is precisely at that point, at that moment of total collapse, that God has been patiently waiting for you, not to judge you, but to finally be able to act without you standing in the way. The strong Christian who never asks for help, who never admits weakness, who never says, "I cannot do this anymore," is not an example of faith. It is an example of pride disguised as spirituality. Because genuine faith does not deny the pain, it takes it to God. Genuine faith does not pretend to be fine. It comes to the throne of grace exactly as it is, broken, tired, and desperate. Think about how much energy you have already spent trying to resolve what only God can resolve. How many sleepless nights planning ways out that never worked. How many internal conversations rehearsing how you are going to sort out that impossible situation. How many times you went to bed more anxious than when you woke up. All of that is a sign that you are fighting a battle that is not yours, and paying an enormous price for it. Spiritual exhaustion is real, and it does not happen because you are far from God. Sometimes it happens precisely because you are trying to serve God with strength that has already run out. Elijah was exhausted under a tree after one of the greatest spiritual victories in history. It was not a lack of faith. It was real human burnout. And God did not rebuke him. He sent an angel with food and water. Do you know what the greatest obstacle between you and the miracle you are waiting for is? It is not the enemy. It is not the situation. It is you, trying to resolve, trying to control, trying to carry what was meant to be carried by God. Every time you try to sort out on your own what you have given to God, you are essentially saying, "Lord, I do not trust that you are enough for this." And God, in His infinite patience, steps back, not because He has given up on you, but because He is a gentleman. He does not compete with you for control. If you want to carry it, He lets you carry it. If you want to resolve it, He lets you try. But He stays there waiting for the moment when you finally raise your hands, get down on your knees, and say with every ounce of honesty in your soul, "Lord, I cannot do this." It is yours. That is the moment that changes everything. Not the longest prayer, not the most rigorous fast, not the most powerful verse, but that simple, raw, and utterly honest phrase, I cannot do this. It is yours. In the next parts of this video, you will discover why this is the prayer God most wants to hear, and what happens in the spiritual realm when you finally pray it. The entire Bible is a book about people who reached their limit, and discovered that their limit was precisely where the power of God began. From the very beginning to the very end of Scripture, the pattern repeats itself. Men and women who tried to resolve things in their own strength, failed, surrendered, and it was in the surrender that the miracle happened. This is not a coincidence. It is God's method. Open at 2 Chronicles 20. Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, receives the news that 3 powerful armies are advancing against him. The situation is humanly impossible. And what does he do? He does not summon strategists. He does not reinforce the walls. The Bible says he was afraid and proclaimed a fast throughout the entire kingdom. He went before God and said exactly what he was feeling. We have no strength. We do not know what to do, but our eyes are fixed on you. That is the most honest prayer in the Old Testament. Jehoshaphat did not pretend to have unshakable faith. He did not declare victory in a thunderous voice. He admitted the raw reality. I have no strength. I have no plan. I do not know what to do. And then he did the only thing that remained. He fixed his eyes on God, and God responded with one of the most powerful promises in the whole of the Bible. The battle is not yours, but God's. Now go to the Psalms, the most honest book of prayer that exists. David did not pray with polished religious language. He cried out, groaned, questioned, and wept. How long, Lord? How long will you hide yourself? That is the prayer of a man who was not well, who was at his limit, who had no answer. And yet David was called a man after God's own heart, not in spite of his honesty, because of it. The Psalms teach us that God does not want your perfect prayer. He wants your true prayer. He prefers real tears to a rehearsed hallelujah. He prefers a genuine groan to an empty declaration. When you come before God exactly as you are, broken, confused, exhausted, you are not demonstrating a lack of faith. You are demonstrating the greatest faith of all, that God can handle your reality. Think of Elijah. After calling fire down from heaven on Mount Carmel, after one of the greatest spiritual victories in biblical history, he fled into the desert, sat down under a tree, and asked to die. It is enough, Lord. 2 words. No sophisticated theology, no declaration of faith, just a completely exhausted man telling God he had nothing left. And God did not rebuke him, he fed him. God's response to Elijah is one of the most tender scenes in the whole of the Bible. No sermon came, no rebuke came. An angel came and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too great for you." God knew that Elijah was at his limit. He knew he had no strength left. And instead of demanding more faith, he simply provided what was needed to carry on. That is who God is. And then we come to the most powerful prayer of all, Jesus in Gethsemane. The Son of God, just hours from the cross, prostrating his face on the ground and saying, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." Jesus expressed real anguish, real pain, real weight. And then he completed it with the phrase that defines perfect surrender. Yet not as I will, but as you will. That is the model prayer. If Jesus, the very Son of God, prayed the prayer of surrender, who are we to think we need to come before the Father with everything resolved, everything controlled, and everything understood? Gethsemane sets us free from religious performance. It tells us that it is permitted to feel the weight. It is permitted not to want to go through it. It is permitted to ask for it to pass, as long as in the end, our will bows before the will of the Father. The Bible does not have a single hero of the faith who won their battles through their own strength. Every one of them reached a point of surrender, and that is where God stepped in. Moses before the Red Sea, Gideon with 300 men, Paul with the thorn in his flesh. The pattern is always the same: human weakness acknowledged, divine strength manifested. And it all begins with that simple and transformative prayer: Lord, I cannot do this. It is yours. If this video has found you today, it was not by chance. God knows exactly the weight you are carrying, and He used this content to remind you that you do not have to carry it alone. If something here has touched your heart, I need a favor from you right now. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell notification. Not for me, but so that you do not miss a single message that God still has for your life through this channel. There is a paradox at the heart of the Christian faith that human logic will never be able to resolve. The weak are strong. The last are first. What dies rises again, and what surrenders wins. This paradox is not poetry, it is spiritual principle. And it applies directly to prayer. The prayer that appears weakest in human eyes, "Lord, I cannot do this. It is yours," is the most powerful in the eyes of God. Why? Because this prayer does something no other prayer does with the same completeness. It empties the self. And it is precisely in the emptiness of the self that God moves with total freedom. The problem with many long, eloquent prayers full of declarations is that they are still full of ourselves, our plans, our expectations, our deadlines. The prayer of surrender removes all of that and leaves only God at the center. Paul understood this in a visceral way. He had a problem, referred to as a thorn in the flesh, which he asked God 3 times to remove, and God said no. But alongside the no came one of the most liberating declarations in the Bible. "My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness." Paul then arrived at the most counterintuitive conclusion possible. When I am weak, then I am strong. That changes everything. Think of it this way. When you are trying to resolve the situation on your own, who is in control? You are. And what are your resources? Limited, finite, human. When you surrender the battle to God, who takes control? God does. And what are His resources? Unlimited, eternal, supernatural. The mathematics is straightforward, but human pride makes this equation incredibly difficult to accept and practice. There is another reason why this prayer is so powerful. It is an act of radical trust. Not the easy trust of good days, but the courageous trust of impossible days. Anyone can trust God when everything is going well. What moves the heart of God is when you are in the worst moment of your life, with no way out in sight, understanding nothing, and you still say, "Lord, I do not know what you are going to do, but I know who you are. It is yours." This prayer also breaks the cycle of anxiety. Anxiety feeds on control, or rather, on the illusion of control. When you keep ruminating over the problem, planning ways out, rehearsing conversations and imagining scenarios, you are trying to control the uncontrollable, and that generates more anxiety. But when you genuinely surrender, not merely with words, but with your heart, something breaks. A peace that surpasses all understanding takes the place of torment. Philippians 4 verses 6 and 7 describe exactly this process. "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts." The sequence is clear. You present, you surrender, and peace comes as a guard. Not as a reward for your perfect faith, but as a consequence of your genuine surrender. There is also a profound spiritual dimension to this prayer that many do not perceive. When you insist on resolving things on your own, you are, without realizing it, operating in the realm of the flesh, and in the flesh, the enemy has access. But when you surrender the battle to God, it moves into the realm of the Spirit, and in that realm, the enemy has no jurisdiction over what is in God's hands. Surrendering the battle is not strategic weakness. It is the most intelligent move on the spiritual board. And there is more. This prayer opens the door to solutions you would never have imagined. When you are in control, the only ways out available are those your mind can see. But when God takes over, He is not limited by your imagination, your logic, or your experience. He can open a path through the middle of the sea. He can make the sun stand still. He can turn the enemy into an ally. He can resolve things in a way you would never have thought of. The prayer, Lord, I cannot do this. It is yours, is powerful because it is real, because it is humble, because it is courageous, and because it is the only prayer that positions you exactly where God can act with full power in your situation. It is not the prayer of someone who has given up. It is the prayer of someone who has finally understood who God is and who you are before Him. It is the prayer that opens heaven. And in the final part of this video, you will learn how to pray it for real. We have reached the most important moment of this video. Everything that has been said up to this point, the theology, the biblical stories, the spiritual principles, is worth nothing if it remains only in theory, because surrender is not a concept. It is a decision. It is an act. It is a concrete movement of your heart towards God. And in the following paragraphs, you will learn exactly how to do this for real, not as a ritual, but as a genuine encounter. The first step is the most difficult and the most necessary. Be honest with yourself. Before being honest with God, you need to stop deceiving yourself. Look at the situation you are carrying and admit it internally. I am not well. I do not have the answer. I cannot resolve this. That moment of brutal honesty with yourself is where everything begins. You cannot surrender what you have not yet admitted you are carrying. The second step is to create a moment of intentional silence. The prayer of surrender cannot be prayed in the middle of the rush, in the car, whilst checking your phone. You need to stop, close a door, sit down or prostrate yourself. Shut out the external noise so that the internal noise can begin to quieten as well. Silence is not emptiness. It is the environment where God speaks and where the heart can finally hear what it needs to hear. The third step is to name the battle. Say out loud or write down exactly what you are carrying. Not in vague terms, not in religious language, in simple, honest words. Lord, I am afraid of losing my marriage. I do not know what to do. Or, Lord, this debt is destroying me and I see no way out. Naming the battle is an act of courage, and it is what transforms a vague prayer into a real and specific surrender. The fourth step is to speak the words of surrender, and let them cost you something. Do not say them mechanically. Let every word come from the deepest place within you. Lord, I cannot do this. It is yours. Let those 6 words carry the full weight of everything you have tried to resolve and could not. Of every sleepless night. Of every fear that has accumulated. Let that phrase be the most honest thing you have ever said in your life. The fifth step is to deal with the thoughts that come back, because they will come back. You will surrender, and 10 minutes later your mind is already planning again, already anxious again, already trying to resolve again. That is normal. It is not a lack of faith, it is the nature of the human mind. Each time the thought returns, you simply repeat the surrender. Surrender is not a one-off act, it is a daily posture, sometimes hour by hour. The sixth step is to act in obedience, not in anxiety. Surrendering the battle to God does not mean folding your arms and doing nothing. Jehoshaphat still went out with the army. David still picked up the stones. What changed was not the action, it was the motivation. You act because God has guided you, not because fear has pushed you. You obey the next step God has shown you, and leave the rest with Him. Do your part. Let Him do the impossible part. The seventh step is to cultivate gratitude before seeing the result. This is the step that separates mature faith from immature faith. Immature faith gives thanks after the miracle happens. Mature faith gives thanks before, because it already knows who God is and already trusts His character regardless of the outcome. When you begin to give thanks in the middle of the battle, you are declaring to the spiritual world that you believe God is already at work, even though you cannot yet see it. The eighth step is the most transformative of all. Pray this prayer every single day. Not only in times of crisis, in the everyday. Each morning, before the day begins, say, Lord, this day is yours. These problems are yours. This life is yours. Transform surrender into a way of life, not an emergency resource. Because the believer who lives surrendered is not one who never faces battles. It is one who never faces them alone. This video ends here, but your journey of surrender begins now. Perhaps you have arrived at the end of this video, carrying something that is destroying you from the inside. Perhaps you are exhausted from fighting alone. Then I invite you, right now in this very moment, to pray the simplest and most powerful prayer of your life. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and say from the very depths of your heart, Lord, I cannot do this. It is yours. Heaven is listening. And God is already at work.